Hello and welcome to the Saratoga Springs Planning Commission meeting for August 26, 2021. I've asked Commissioner Bryce McConkey to lead us in the pledge, so I'll go ahead and let him take over.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, this evening, Commissioner Audrey Barton and Commissioner Josh Wagstaff are both excused as they had Commissioner Wagstaff had a commitment and Commissioner Barton was not feeling well. But we do have a quorum present, so we'll move along on the agenda. Next item is public input. Time has been set aside for any person to express ideas, concerns, comments, questions, or issues that are not listed as public hearing on the agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, no repeat comments. If anyone's here for any public comment other than the item for the Wander Village Plan and the accessory dwelling unit, which is on the agenda, you can come up and make any comments you'd like. Okay, I'll go ahead and close public comment at this time, and we'll move on to item number 4, public hearing for Wander Village Plan 2, located approximately Pioneer Crossing and Redwood Road, Oakwood Homes as applicant, presented by planner David Stroud. Go ahead.
Members of the Public Planning Commission, this is now Village Plan 2, Village Plan 1 in Wander. If you've been by there lately, it's approaching build out. I think we've got whatever vacant land in Village Plan 1 is vacant. I think most of that is under review now as far as plats go. And so we've got Village Plan 2 now in the works. Just so you know, we have looked at a Village Plan 3 that's been kind of put on hold until Village Plan 2 comes through now. But what you're looking at tonight, this will be a public hearing as well. This will be a recommendation to the City Council. The proximal location would be Pony Express and Redwood Road, with Oakwood Homes being the applicant. So what you see here, this is the lotting plan. Village Plan 2 is approximately 80 acres. They are proposing 394 ERUs. Now the community plan says Village Plan 2 would have a range of 360 to 490. So they're just shy of 100 units under theoretically what they could put in Village Plan 2. There will be 8.5 acres of commercial, which you see there in the gray. There's also 9.6 acres of open space. The community plan does say that the open space should be between 7 and 10 acres in here, so they're well at the upper end of the open space requirement for Village Plan 2. And they do now have 2 locations for meeting houses. I believe the community plan shows 1. There is a caveat in the community plan that says configurations of lots, things like that, can be changed at the village plan level without having to go back through a community plan amendment. So basically what you're doing is approving whatever standards now come before you as part of the village plan. It just shows the lotting plan, the breakdown of the residential uses, whether they be single family detached, the cluster homes or townhomes. Basically what's already been done in the past, nothing really out of the ordinary here as far as the types of units. The landscape and open space plan, there will be a pocket park in the center of the project. The next slide will then show the details of the pocket park. And then we've got great pedestrian connectivity within the project itself. The blue areas you see are sidewalks that will be maintained by the city as far as the integrity goes. The adjacent property owners will do, of course, what's standard practice, snow removal, that sort of thing. The yellow along the perimeter would be the community trails maintained by the city, again, just the integrity. Community trails then are in the red. Those are the interior mid-block type crossings. Just to point out, something we did ask the applicant to do. If you look right here, does my cursor show up on there? Just between the commercial and the meeting house property, initially, they did not have a trail connection there, and we asked them to do that as a sort of mid-block. Obviously, as commercial pushes forward, the church site pushes forward. That's a great location where you're going to get people walking to those sites in between there. So we did ask them for that. There wasn't a whole lot of change on this other than that as far as the trail connection go. They did put that connector trail within there. These are just some of the highlights. I do have the village plan queued up on a different file. We can bring that up if you need to go through any more details. But we've compared this obviously to the community plan. It meets the guidelines under the community plan. Then of course gets more specific as far as what can be done in the village plan, more details. So staff recommends approval, that you forward a positive recommendation onto the city council with the findings and conditions you see there. There are a few minor red lines still left, nothing big. That's why we're now presenting it to you now. But one of those conditions would be just to finalize those red lines, and they are in your packet before it is scheduled for the city council. And of course, you do also have the option to continue or forward a negative recommendation onto the city council.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant available? Would you like to come up? Please state your name and address for the record. The business address is fine.
Sure. Rick Herring, 88 Inverness Circle East, Englewood, Colorado.
Do you have anything you'd like to add to the presentation?
I think David hit all the highlights pretty good. I think the big takeaway here is this is kind of a continuation of Village 1. It's just kind of the next portion of development. We're not going to be doing anything different than we've done in Village 1 thus far. It's just kind of a continuation and keep going as we're quickly approaching build out of Village 1.
Okay. This is a public hearing, so I'll go ahead and open this up for any comments from the public. Looks like do we have any comments that were emailed in? Okay. So seeing as we have no public comment, we'll go ahead and close the public comment section, and I'll open this up to the commission for questions or comments. Commissioner Kilgore.
So one of the recommendations from the staff about if we want to recommend approval is, and I quote, it was the Planning Commission should make staff approval of red lines a condition of approval. And so I think we should just, whoever's going to make the motion, just add that in there if you feel so inclined. It was the recommendation of the staff. And being that, I was just going to ask the applicant, do you feel that you can comply with the red lines in the staff report?
I didn't know there were any red lines left to address, but if there's any left, I'm sure they're quite minor, and I don't foresee a problem with that.
Just a few, right? I think.
Yeah, they're
just a few.
if you want to call them ticky-tack, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I was comfortable enough bringing it to you now.
Right.
With your recommendation. None of them are any kind of approaching anything major, so.
Okay.
It doesn't
I'm sure
change.
it's something we can accommodate.
Yeah, it doesn't change the overall plan. They're just things that, notations, things like that they need to change.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly we can adjust any sort of annotations or typos or minor
Yeah,
revisions.
I mean, what I saw, it was all pretty minor.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
mostly just administrative.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And then there was one of the red lines talked about, I mean, this is maybe a little bit more than administrative, but it says, so I'd like to ask, is the applicant okay with the staff's changes to the primary and secondary, excuse me, primary and secondary water line diameters?
We don't have the engineer here tonight to speak to those.
Yeah, because again, I don't know if that was just because of how you wrote it on the diagrams, or if that's actually like, a physical change that has to be made. I'm not sure, but
Are these on proposed water lines, or are these existing water lines that need to be replaced?
I'm not sure if they're new or existing.
Yeah, they should be the new lines servicing the project. Standard procedure is, a development only has to put in the size of utilities that, are needed for their project. If there's a case of upsizing lines, then typically the applicant would be reimbursed for any kind of upsizing lines. Now, I don't have engineering's not present here tonight, but there could be some instances where there may be something in the impact or the capital facilities plan for utilities that would then require some additional work to go into that. But certainly, it's standard practice that, they obviously put in what they need, upsize if the city requests it, then they get reimbursed for upsizing.
Okay.
Because obviously, adjacent property or vacant property that's adjacent there is obviously at some point it's going to come through and use that utility line. that would be the necessity for any kind of upgrades.
Yeah, I thought I saw something about how it's not just for this particular neighborhood, but it's going to be maybe shared or, with other developing neighborhoods as well. And that's why it was like from 10-inch to 12-inch or something like that.
Yeah, that's a pretty minor upgrade. I don't see a problem with facilitating that.
Okay. And then that's also true for the storm drain lines as well, so probably the same thing. It was the same kind of changes made for the primary, secondary water, and then also for storm drain lines.
We've had a lot of very extensive conversations with the city engineering and public works departments to figure out these storm lines.
Okay.
Because they are quite an undertaking going through here. There's several lines running all different directions
Right.
in Riverside, and then a connection. There's a 48-inch line that's going in that connects an existing one on the future Pony Express with other lines that are coming from the northwest. So there's been a lot of talk. So if there's a red line about the storm line, I'm sure it's been covered between our engineers and the city department.
Okay. Yeah, if nothing bad's come up, then you would, if something bad had come up, you would know about it.
I don't
right?
think
So-
we'd be here if they hadn't figured that part out.
Right. Okay, and then I was just ask the staff, so the Jordan Promenade Waterfront Park footnote 4, it was in page 108. No, it wasn't. I don't know why it's, maybe it was 100, page 100. Maybe, nope, it wasn't. Anyway, there was a footnote.
It was
It
probably
says,
the note about the park going in.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, and Village Plan 3 is going to be right on the heels of this one. They do have to do an amendment to the community plan for Village Plan 3. Like I said, we were actually reviewing Village Plan 3 before 2 came in. 3 was going to come first. Then they realized there was some product changes they wanted to make. So that's the only reason why Village Plan 3 is on hold. So once that, and we have the application to amend that community plan now. So Village Plan 3 you're going to see shortly as well.
Okay.
And that'll follow right on the heels of this one.
And then specifically with that footnote, it said the developer is in discussions with the city about doing a light watercraft put-in, and I was wondering if that's gone anywhere.
It's been a long time since I did look at the Village Plan 3 because it was on hold, so I don't know the specifics on that. I do believe there are some, I don't know if it's the state or the county actually went in and put in some, maybe on the other side of the river, but I believe that is part of the open space plan, the park put-ins there for access to the river under Village Plan 3.
Oh, okay, all right. So maybe in the future. Right?
As 3 comes in, yeah.
It comes in, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then one last thing on the traffic study. And there's the summary of key findings and recommendations in the traffic study. The recommendation of the traffic study is that the Redwood Road, I know this is a UDOT thing, but, or is it? Yeah, I guess it is. Redwood Road is UDOT.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, Redwood Road should be widened to have 3 lanes in each direction. And I was wondering, how seriously will UDOT take this? Is it already, do we think it's going to happen? And the reason why I ask is, the study says that all intersections are expected to operate at acceptable LOS, level of service, during evening peak hours in 2040. So I was wondering, is that the case only if Redwood Road is widened per the recommendation?
We currently have plans into UDOT for adding a 3rd lane and a bicycle lane on the east side of Redwood Road.
Okay, and so if you put that, if that gets put in, then we would expect level of service to be operating at the.
Correct.
Okay.
We're going through that approval process with UDOT now for the Village 1 portions that will continue through Village 2 as well.
Okay, terrific,
So,
terrific. All right, thank you, that's it for me.
Any other questions or comments from the commission? If not, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion. Commissioner Anderson.
So Pony Express will not continue all the way through until we get to Village 3?
Yeah, I mean, it borders, well, I don't know if I have the overall map here. That doesn't give you, I mean, right now, I believe the road plat now for Pony has been recorded. It's not shown, and the picture you see on the screen is taken from county records. I don't think the map's been updated yet. but I believe the road plat out to the river for Pony is now recorded.
Okay.
The time frame for that, I wish Jeremy was here. He'd be the better one to speak on time frame on that. But that, of course, would be, incorporated as part of Village Plan 3.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Based upon the information discussion tonight, I move to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council regarding Wander Village Plan 2 with the findings and conditions in the staff packet, and also with the additional condition that the Planning Commission should make, and that the staff approval of red lines is a condition of approval.
We have a motion from Commissioner Kilgore. Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second that.
We have a second from Commissioner McConkey. Any question on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That passed unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
The next item on the agenda is a public hearing for the City Code Amendment, Section 19.02, definitions, and 19.20, accessory dwelling units, city initiated, presented by the city staff. Who's going to be taking
Commission,
that?
as we're all well aware, the state code changes for House Bill 82 requires now that all cities basically come up with they didn't have one before, as the state's calling it, internal accessory dwelling unit, an IADU. You did look at a draft of that ordinance at your last meeting. So tonight would be the public hearing for that ordinance, and I'll have to switch screens here and bring it up. But basically what we need to do tonight, whether you're in favor of it, against it, any recommendation you want to add to it, we ask that you do forward that onto the City Council tonight. We are under a time constraint as far as the state code. We have to have it in place by October. This would then put that for City Council review in September. Should the council want to take 2 meetings to do it, we have the flexibility then to have 2 meetings with the City Council. So my recommendation to you would be to forward whatever you see fit as far as your recommendation. And of course, your recommendation, if you want to see things added or changed, then certainly, have that as part of your recommendation. But that's where we would go with that tonight. Switch here. All right, so the couple of changes that we're looking at, we need to amend, well, first off, 1920. 20 is a current vacant section of Title 19, so we are going to add this as 1920 to do a little fill in there. Not a lot changed from what you looked at last time. There's some change you see in blue made by the Attorney's Office. Again, I don't think there's a whole lot that changed. We also need to amend, and go to the bottom here, definitions 19.0202 to reflect changes made by the state code as well. And so that's what you see there in the red line format. Of course, everything in red in the previous is obviously brand new as far as the IADU ordinance goes. You also have on your, put on the counter there, the map that will go along with this. We did reach out to several or all of the known HOAs to see what their thoughts were on ADUs. So you have the map in front of you now that does identify several subdivisions that, Ken, you may have to fill in here. Did they contact the homeowners and have them vote on it, whether they wanted them or not, or what was the story on the specific subdivisions on the map?
We sent out an email to all of the known contacts for HOAs in the community and gave them a prescribed list of questions to answer for us. Some of them mentioned that they did go out and try to contact their homeowners within. Others were just basically trying to represent what they thought was going to be how the direction they would like to go forward in. But we did not receive a majority of responses back. So, but attached to this map is the responses that we did receive. The two, excuse me, basic questions that we asked were, do you currently permit ADUs in your HOA? And if not, are you willing to? And we did have some other questions about what are your concerns and such, but we wanted to just show what we received of the 13 that responded out of 38 total. There were 11 that didn't respond, others that were multifamily, 14 that we didn't need to have responses from. But 7 of the total said no, they do not currently permit, and no, they do not want to permit. So we've identified those no answers on the map. So the black bolded outlined areas represent those communities that do not want to move forward with this. So this represents about 11% of the residential zoning in the community, and we're able to exempt up to 25%. So we'll see, what your recommendation might be, or what the city council determines to do with that. There's not a requirement to exempt anybody. However, there may be a feeling politically or otherwise to permit those that have said no, or especially in these older historic areas that have carried on in this way for many years, that we may want to allow them to be exempt. But this is basically informational at this point. I do have to apologize. On the top of the map and in the legend it says EDU. That was a typo. It's ADU. We're going to fix that, but didn't get that in time for tonight's meeting. So if there's any questions about what we did on the map or how we came up with those responses, I'll be happy to get into that further.
Okay, since this is a public meeting, I'll go ahead and open this up for public comment at this time. Did we receive any emails from the public or any comment? No?
Not me personally, no.
All right, so since how there is no public comment for this, we'll go ahead and close public comment at this time, and I will open this up to the commission for comments, questions. Commissioner Kilgore.
I just had one question. I wonder if it's just consistency. In so this is like on the second page, 19.20.02.2a. So that's the very beginning, the definitions, and it's the owner-occupant part in the very first paragraph in A. And so when you read it, near the end, it says, oh gosh, I can't read it. Each living truster of the trust shall so occupy the dwelling unit except for a truster who temporarily resides elsewhere due to a disability or infirmity. Okay, so that's what that says. And then just below it, in 19.20.03.2, owner-occupied, it actually expands that part about being disability infirmity, because the first time I read that, I thought, well, there's a lot of other reasons why people might not be there, like if they're on a mission, or on a sabbatical. And then the definition actually says, unless they're on a temporary job assignment, sabbatical, military service, voluntary service, things like that. So but it doesn't say disability or infirmity. So I'm wondering, are they two different things there, or is it really the same thing? And so
let's read it here. Fred, why don't you answer that?
Yeah, I noticed that as well as I was reading through this. And I'm looking at them as two different things. And that's why I added that language there under 2 that says, except as provided herein, because it's provided in 2 locations, one there, and then the other one, as you point out, is above in that other location. So I'm looking at them as two separate kind of exemptions to that owner occupancy requirement.
Okay, so if they're two separate, what does that mean? So if someone is gone for a disability, then what do we say? Okay, you're okay. And then if they're gone for a military service, we still say it's okay. Then why do we have two separate ones if they're not all the same?
That's just how it was drafted, and so I in the interest of economy, and rather than combine them and make a lot of changes, I just tried to add some language that kind of clarified that.
Okay, so by putting that, what is it, the exempted, except as provided herein? So by having that in there, then someone can't say that, yeah, but because of 19.20.03.2, which doesn't say disability, I have standing in some kind of argument, right? Because if it says, as expressed herein, then they would cover both. I mean, I can't just pick and choose my ordinances.
Yeah,
Okay.
under the rules of statutory construction, every term, every word is given meaning and effect. And so the fact that it's in two different locations means you try to interpret the law such that both provisions are given legal effect.
Okay, all right. I just want to
That
make
makes
sure that
sense?
someone can't just pick and choose their ordinance because it's missing something. So
Nothing's going to stop someone from trying to do that if they want to, but.
right, but as far as the city goes, we're protected by the language.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, terrific. Thank you. That's it for me.
Commissioner McConkey, did you have?
I do. I want to start off with just maybe it's a question/comment about the HOA versus the ordinance. That if the city adopts an ordinance just citywide, then there's nothing from the state that would require an HOA to allow accessory dwelling units. Is that correct?
If we don't mention by ordinance, which we will need to add that verbiage in here, but we just kind of, we weren't ready with exactly how we were moving forward with this yet, but we will want to have in the ordinance some kind of language which will lean to the attorneys to help us make, but we will identify somehow, except for those areas or HOAs or something to that effect that are identified, and we'll identify them in some manner, either by exhibit or by name or whatever. So if we didn't do that, then they would not be exempted, and the state mandate would follow through for them as well.
And so the HOAs would then not be allowed to
Prohibit.
prevent
Right.
and prohibit.
And any new, say a new subdivision comes in as well, an HOA cannot prevent I-80s from coming into their neighborhood. They could say anything they want in CC&Rs, but it would not be enforceable. State code would trump that and say, no, they are allowed to go there. Unless they're part of that mapping. Because over time, that map's going to potentially be modified as well over time. But the bill is drafted that HOAs cannot prohibit unless identified on that map.
I see. That's interesting to me. Okay. I'm all for allowing the HOAs to have some powers, if you will, to regulate some of the things that I think are more fitting on the HOA level. But that seems to be put the city in a more of a enforcement position, if I'm not mistaken.
We're allowed 25%, right? 25%?
You can go up to 25%.
Someone's going to lose.
It's either, you can do 25, or you can just, across the city, say everybody can have it. There's pros and cons to each. And ultimately, it'll be up to the city council which one they see as fitting for the city.
If I could add, some municipalities they're doing the 25% and they're using different criteria to identify those locations where they're not going to allow ADUs. And so this is just the way that our city has determined to do it. And I just echoing what Ken said, the reference to the map, I think it makes it pretty clear that those are the areas that are essentially exempted from the operation of the state statute that would otherwise require areas to have the ADUs.
So the state statute is requiring, I just want to be sure that I'm understanding this correctly, just trying to separate the HOA from the city, is requiring the city to allow ADUs for 75% of its residential areas, if I'm understanding it
That's correct.
It's been a little too long since I've read the statute, the state statute. Do they reference the HOAs?
No, they've left it up to the cities to determine how they want to identify the 25%.
Okay, so I'm trying to be careful here how I'm saying what I'm saying, of course. If the city adopts the allowance citywide for the ADUs, will the state statute prevent any maybe legal recourse within the HOA to then prohibit ADUs in
Yes.
their HOA?
Yes. Yeah, HOAs would not be able to prevent IADUs in their HOAs.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I was wondering. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. So I've got a few questions here. There's a few technicalities, just of
Commissioner Ryan wants to
clarification.
make a comment. And then you can go after him.
On page 2, right at the top of page 2, under purpose, I think it's just a typo. I'm trying not to be too nitpicky. I just noticed a few things I was reading through here. On the last line of that section, 19.20.01, last line, it's starting in the middle, and broaden the range. Is that supposed to read of affordable housing in the city? Okay. And then under 19.20.03, number 2, owner occupied, I think some of the verbiage in here, where it says the owner of a single-family property, in keeping with some uniformity in the verbiage. I just recommend using the word detached instead of a single. The owner of a detached, or maybe it's sorry, I haven't read through this since Sunday. Owner of a detached single-family dwelling. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to fit more with the uniformity of the verbiage.
Which section are you looking at?
This is 19.20.3, number 2, owner occupied. So my suggestion is the owner of a detached single-family dwelling with an IADU. Does that make sense?
See what else we had up here, if we define that.
Oh, there was one right above it. There was one right above it.
Primary dwelling, it would match the language in primary dwelling.
Yeah.
I mean, putting detached there certainly
Yeah, detached.
clarifies it.
I think it clarifies, yeah, and then
It's consistent.
consistency, that's the word. So detached, single-family dwelling. And then number 6, moving down next to building code. All construction and remodeling of IADUs shall comply with all building and fire ordinances and ordinance requirements in effect at the time of, and my suggestion is to insert the word legal in front of construction. The time of legal construction or remodeling. And that, again, was, I think, was a clarification thought. Then moving down to number 10, utility meters. I'm not comfortable with having separate meters in a ADU. To me, allowing separate water meters and separate gas meters, power meters, and so forth, in my mind, we start approaching duplex. And I think that it opens a door that I would prefer not to open in both function and keeping the environment of single-family dwelling in a neighborhood. In my view, and I've seen this before, if someone wants to meter separately, there are private meters and methods of privately metering the utilities so that they can bill accordingly if that's how they choose to rent.
I thought that there is no requirement to have the separate meters, and yet, right. But then,
We can prohibit the installation of separate.
I would like to
you say
prohibit.
we can or we can't?
We cannot prohibit the
We cannot, right?
installation of
Yeah.
separate.
And that's why I think if we try to say anything about not having it, that now we're making it, whether you have meters or not have a meter, a part of the definition of an ADU, and I don't think that should be.
I mean, our reason behind putting this in there is obviously it makes billing much easier. You know, you're not having to say, well, we're on the same electrical or gas, how much do you use? There's no way to tell. Yeah, there's going to be another meter. Yeah, they're not that obtrusive, but you can have a house that has 3 air conditioning units too for a single family home.
Yeah.
Really no different than that. That's why we put it in there, is this, just because it's ease of billing. The billing does has to be in the property owner's name. So if the tenant skips town, the city's not holding, or whoever's not holding the bill to say, well, who's going to pay this? We ran into this knows where I previously worked, where we had that changed because of that happened quite a bit, where that billing was under the tenant's name, picked up and left, and then who's holding the bill then at that point?
Yeah, I like the flexibility of it because there are buildings that do have separate meters, and if you don't say may have, then you could be defining an ADU by the meters, and I don't think that's necessary.
And I don't see it quite that way. I think that it wouldn't necessarily be in the definition. I look at ADUs, and this is my vision of ADUs, is you have a single-family dwelling and a single-family property. And we're allowing kind of a hybrid between that and a duplex. And a duplex that you have separate living quarters, but it goes more beyond that. It goes into, fire-rated separations and et cetera, and separate utilities and where you can and can't run your gas lines and so forth. The ADU is kind of like allowing that second family, but causing, in my mind, the owner / primary resident to be responsible and responsible for the whole thing, for their part, and allowing someone to come into their building and to occupy that space. We don't have typically don't have separate utilities. In my mind, as soon as we start separating the utilities, it creates more of a duplex environment without the physical protections and so forth. And we start losing the single-family
So I
feel,
understand.
if you will, environment.
Yeah. I do understand that concern, but at the same time, we aren't defining a duplex or an ADU by the meter.
No.
And so
no.
therefore, just let it happen if it does. I mean, I don't really see the problem, because what if there is a building that, or a residence that already has separate meters, and they see that in there that we're not, that it does not have separate meters, then are they now not an ADU? Are they not in compliance, so therefore they have to now get a construction to be those meters taken out?
Well, the sole purpose of having a separate meter would be to serve a separate dwelling.
Don't know what the reason is.
Right.
The fact is, it simply doesn't. So why even bother? Just leave it flexible, because that's not part of the definition anyway. As soon as you don't allow it, then it becomes part of the definition. Otherwise, they'll have to take it out, because they do have separate meters, even if that wasn't the intent. I think if it's in the definition, yeah, definitely.
What would be the
But
benefit either way? Let's say if we do allow it, what would be the benefit?
that
could not be.
more of these ADUs can be compliant without having to spend money just to fit that one requirement. I don't see why that requirement's
I'm not
necessary.
following.
I mean, there's some that are already dual, they already have duals. So if you make that a rule, they have to go in and retro by pulling something out.
Even though it's not part of the definition of what an ADU is.
So we have ADUs currently on separate meters? Is that what we're
We
saying?
may, I don't know, but, why make that a restriction?
Well, anything that's legally existing, of course, the city ordinance would not be able to retroactively require them to fix what used to be compliant.
Well, we don't have legal,
we don't
we
have
may
that.
have one or two in Beacon Point, because that's the only place currently right now that allows ADUs is that development, and there may be a few in there at most, but those would technically be the only legal ones right now in the city.
Yeah, so we are making them change if they want to call themselves an ADU to comply with the ordinance. And if it's not part of the definition, why restrict something? Just let it, just be flexible. It's not part of the definition
And
of an ADU.
it's not required. Someone may choose to, I don't want to have 2 meters on my house.
Yeah.
Did you say we can't prohibit this anyways?
Yeah, we cannot prohibit the installation of separate utility meters.
So this whole discussion is moot then, right? Because we can't.
State code does allow the city to prohibit the installation of separate meters. That's one of the few things that it still does allow.
Oh, excuse me, yeah.
But that's not the question. The question is, are we prohibited from doing it? So if the code may allow for it, but are we
This,
prohibited?
yeah, like he said, the city may
Prohibited
We
or
prohibit
allow?
installation.
we can prohibit it.
We can prohibit it.
We can.
So
We
I
can
think
say
the
you can
discussion
only
goes-
have 1 meter
Right.
for both. We can do that.
So I appreciate the clarification, because then I think the discussion goes to, I think the point is, overall, what do you want to achieve as a city? Because I do think there's a factor to that, to Commissioner McConkey's point, that it does open, I guess, your overall goal. What is it that you want? Do you want more ADUs or the opportunity to have more ADUs, or do you want to get by with what the state is mandating down to the cities via this law that is now upon us? So do we want to be more open about it, or do we want to say, yes, we're requiring with you in the strictest sense of what we are allowed to do? Is that a fair summation of what you're saying? Because allowing the double means then that it's not necessarily encouraging it, but then it allows for the proliferation of, somebody me considering to buy my home goes, oh, now I can put in 2 meters, and that changes my goal as a homeowner, because now I can have that ADU with a separate meter. It's more convenient. We're not sharing the billing. We're not doing all these things. So it's promoting, in my opinion, it's promoting ADUs more so. So what is your overall goal? As a city, are we looking to say, this law exists now, and we will comply, and we will do it in the strictest sense that we can, just to check the boxes? Or are we a city that says, this law is in place, we welcome it with open arms, these are the avenues that allow us to be able to do that?
Well, I
And if
think.
that's not a fair summation, that's at least how I'm seeing it overall.
Sure. I appreciate that. I think that what we're doing is, as far as, of course, creating an ordinance for the ADUs, especially the IADUs, I think is a great move. I think it's needed. I think that there needs to be an allowance to a healthy extent. My intent is to preserve as much as possible that single-family dwelling feel and environment.
So
Anyway, to me, in my mind, I feel like that will help to preserve that. Also recognizing that anyone who has an ADU still has the ability to meter separately using a private meter and installing a private meter either inside the house or elsewhere. But as far as it comes to the utility company and having separate utility meters from the utility, to me, that's kind of the threshold that I would prefer to stay away from, allowing that to just be a personal and a private decision using private means of metering. That's how I feel about that. So that's certainly not preventing separate metering. It's just taking it, making it more of a private.
Yeah, what I would say, I mean, various opinions have been expressed. If you're the one that ends up making the motion, you can certainly tack that on your motion and recommend the council go that route.
Yeah, the council could consider that. But I think we also need to I see a whole lot of red on the second column. So I think, obviously it's a great move, but maybe we need to have more due diligence as a city to understand. I mean, we have at best a 50% response ratio. And I don't know, I would love to learn more about what our efforting was towards the HOAs. Was it a single email? Was it a phone call? Was it multiple emails? Was it a knock on the door? I would love to know more, just because I see more red than I see green. And I wonder if we have the correct sentiment of what the citizens of Saratoga Springs want to do with ADUs.
If you don't mind me finishing up here, I think I'm almost
sorry,
done.
and I'm sorry, Commissioner McConkey.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I have to read my note here. On failure to complete registration, that's number 14. I had some mixed feelings on this one. I feel like the city needs a little more teeth, if you will, in the interest of resident safety and well-being, et cetera. Is this $500 a one-time fee? I don't remember if we talked about this 2 weeks ago. If it's a one-time fee, or if it's a repetitive fee, if it's a monthly or a day, per day, or what?
We were kind of thinking every minute, to help bolster
Fantastic.
our budget,
It's a 60-day, right? That's what that says? You got a deadline of 60 days?
Well, after the 2 years,
After the 2 years,
that's provided you have one in your basement right now. And
correct.
so if somebody after
Or even in the
law
future
takes
here.
effect and decides to have one, then this doesn't apply to them, I'm guessing.
So anyone who has one illegally now has 2 years to rectify. Anyone, once this is adopted, assuming it will be adopted, then essentially that 2 years only applies to existing. If I understand that correctly. So it seemed a little bit vague on what the motivation might be to come into compliance. And I'll just leave it at that. Then had a note on the lien. I wrote down, what will be the remedy for a lien placed on the property? Will be a fine or just simple compliance? It just seemed to kind of be left a little bit hanging there.
Are you asking what the lien would be? How much?
So let me read this. In addition to any other legal or equitable remedies available as provided by law, the city may hold a lien against a property that contains a non-compliant internal accessory dwelling unit. So what, I'm
that
not
state?
completely
Can I
familiar
address
with
that?
what the lien looks like and so
Right.
forth.
So Ken and I went over this a little bit and discussed this. The state code is very detailed related to the liens and the procedures and everything associated with these. And rather than duplicate that here and put it all in here, we've kind of referred to the state code. And so everything will be done pursuant to the state code.
Okay.
And so I understand that
makes sense.
There's not a lot of detail here, but if you want that detail, then you would need to go to the state code, and we could do that.
If it's in the state statute, then
Yeah, it's very detailed.
reference is good.
Yeah,
There's actually several sections throughout the city code that would reference, okay, we're going to go by what state code says. It's just like Fred said, we're not going to bring all those details.
Yeah,
Because if
okay.
that changes, then we've got to go back and change our code.
Right.
They change it, we don't have it, we just go by what they do.
Yeah.
So would the fine fall under that? Is that like a fine that's state code?
well, that's a good question. This one is this fine is for failure to register, but a lien can be brought for other reasons too, associated with the IADU, and so that may have different fines. I can see right here as I'm looking at the code, it talks about up to $100 a day for a violation. So there are
Okay.
some real teeth to
That's good. That's
to the
good.
state code.
Would it be appropriate to reference the code under 15 with lien?
We could do that. I think what we did was we put as provided by law or state law or something.
Oh, yeah, okay, yep, that's good.
Yeah.
I think it's better just to mention that generically, because as soon as you put numbers in there and things change around, you've got a mess.
Yeah, that works.
And finally, I have a question, getting a little bit outside of my, understanding of the benefits and so forth of balanced housing in the city. I know that housing of balance types can qualify or disqualify a city from receiving grant money and financial funds from outside sources. Will the ADUs and IADUs qualify as being considered in whether it's low income or kind of the balanced? Will that better qualify the city for funding, or is it going to make any difference in that realm?
The IADUs, the city council chose that as a strategy in 2019. There's a group of, I think, 25 strategies, as state code called them. The city had to choose 3 of them. One of those was an adoption of an IADU code. I just called it probably an ADU code back then. But the problem is that nothing mandates what these places can rent for.
Right.
There's no ceiling limits. It's going to be all basically market rate. So with that, it's hard to say, well, does it actually meet? Because we don't track rentals. We don't tell these accessory apartment owners, you can only rent for $800 a month.
Right.
Because we're going to use you now to help qualify for our low to moderate income housing plan. That's just not there. Studies do happen when every couple of years we have our plan updated by state code mandates. We do that. And surveys are done, said, hey, we have this number of, apartments, we have this number of, whatever. But again, it's not tied to a rental number, an amount.
Okay, so it really is going to make no difference when it comes to funding, acquiring outside sources as of right now?
Without knowing the details, how something like that's written or what we would have to follow, I couldn't tell you.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is generally recognized through a lot of housing-related funding sources that an accessory dwelling unit is a component of moderate income housing. But to specify exactly where that lands or its impact or, how much, that's not a very scientific analysis.
Yeah.
Yeah, you may get someone that has
I would
an
agree. I didn't know if there was, something anyway.
Yeah, you may get someone that has one for 800. You may get someone that has their whole basement that looks out over the lake. Hey, $2,500 we'll rent it to anybody that comes with them. I mean,
I've heard of some going for 300. So it's, Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner McConkey. Commissioner Ryan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and again, apologies to Commissioner McConkey. I thought we were about there with what you were saying, so I didn't mean to interject. Sorry about that.
Good.
So I would love just a better rundown of the efforting that was taking place to pull these HOAs.
Okay, so we did our best to collect and all the information we could on HOAs. It's not something that we keep an official contact list with, although I think we're going to start doing that better now, but we haven't had that. So we did our best to gather the information on HOAs, and we found that some of the information we had was not current, that other management companies had taken over the responsibility. We did send out an initial email with our questioning and such. We did a follow-up, and we gave them a deadline as to when we would like to hear from them and when this motion or this ordinance was going forward to Planning Commission, City Council, so they could plan for that. We did a follow-up on the day before the deadline, sent them another that said the exact same thing, and please respond. So we did get a couple more that came in last minute, but there's only so much we can do other than pounding on their door or waiting on their doorstep to respond. I suppose there are efforts that can be taken further, but Mark Christensen mentioned that we'll do what we can do in this regard, but we may just those that are mostly concerned will likely respond and the others, may or may not, and there may be reasons for them not responding, but it's just, at this point, we're moving forward, at least to you and to the city council, with what we've got.
I appreciate a better rundown on that. So we're at 11% right now, is that correct, with those that have responded?
Yes.
So if we were to take the others that have not responded that are single-family HOAs, do we have an idea those were no-nos, what percentage that would be at?
Well, it all depends on which ones and how much acreage is within each one, so
But we
there's
don't,
a myriad of answers.
Don't have a rough guesstimate of what that might be with the remaining?
Oh, you mean with all the remaining?
Yeah, so
the 11% represents those that have said no or want out.
Right, so that's
that
the
means
13 out of the 24?
89% are those that are either in favor or haven't responded, so.
And that's the 13 out of the 24, if I'm understanding that correct?
Yes.
So we have 11 more out there that just didn't respond whatsoever, correct? So I was just wondering if we have a guesstimate, if we were to assume the 11 more out there, judging on the percentages of the ones that we've got back would most likely be a no-no, what that would put our percentage at across the city.
Well, if I could jump in, if we were to look at that, most of the residential developments in the city have an HOA. I think there's only one or two that actually don't. So if they all responded, said no, we'd most likely be well above that 25%.
Yeah. And just because we're moving forward with what we've got now doesn't mean it can't be amended. Yeah. I mean, so if we go forward with just 11%, that means we've got 14% still that we can work with. If we get new responses, then we can amend our map and go up to 25%.
What does that amendment process look like? Do we know at this point? So let's say, for example, and this 24 now that essentially are single-family HOAs that exist today in the state, which would be subject to this?
That we are aware of.
Okay.
You mind if I say something, Commissioner?
Yep.
Ryan, I think you bring up a great thought about criteria if we are going to allow HOAs as an HOA to become exempt, and part of that 25%, it would seem fitting to me that we would have criteria for both qualifying for exemption from allowing the IADUs